This episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast is proudly brought to you by Lifetime Decoys. Lifetime Decoys has set the new standard in decoy rigging equipment. Their signature, patent-pending designs use PVC-coated steel cable to prevent rust and corrosion, allow virtually zero line memory, while providing UV resistance and incredible strength and durability. Unlike monofilament, steel cable won't coil up and tangle with other lines because of excessive line memory. Their swivels and clips are made of high-quality stainless steel, and their aluminum ferrules are hydraulically pressed, providing unsurpassed strength. These materials combine to form the strongest, longest-lasting, and most tangle-proof decoy rigging equipment on the market today. They're also the only manufacturer who offers a warranty of 3 years as well as a money-back satisfaction guarantee. Check out Lifetime Decoys today at lifetimedecoys.com. You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 78. This week on the show, we're talking hunter harassment, and Dan and I share a few stories and some listener stories from their experiences in the field. All right, welcome to the 78th episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We are your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. Check us out at hpoutdoors.com, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you're on Facebook, you can check out our HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast listeners group. Hang out, talk with a bunch of listeners of the show. If you just new to the show, you can catch up all the past episodes, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that great podcast content can be found. This week's episode is brought to you by Gunner Kennels. Engineered for your dog, designed for travel, and built for your peace of mind, the G1 Kennel has set the new industry standard and put Gunner Kennels in a category all its own. Gunner Kennels was started to protect your pet, and it continues to be at the center of everything that they do. Gunner Kennels are dedicated to building the best and safest pet crate on the market. Man's best friend deserves man's best kennel. Check out their G1 series of kennels and accessories at www.gunnerkennels.com. We'd also like to thank 737 Duck and Goose Calls, original design, American craftsmanship, precision tuned, superior sound, and unparalleled service, and Big Al's Silhouette Decoys, quality silhouette decoys proudly made right here in the USA. Thank you to the sponsors of this week's show, and we encourage all of the listeners of this show to go out and support the companies that support what we do. Joining me this week, as he always does, is my fearless co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up, man?
Not too much. I know, you said this is episode 78, but I believe that this is number 100 for the files uploaded on iTunes. We did our Foul Friday there for a while, and even though this is our full episode, number 78, I believe it's number 100 for us, so that's pretty cool. A baby milestone, but not really going to celebrate it till that's the full episode number 100. But just a side thought.
Yeah, we don't really celebrate division championships here. We pretty much only celebrate the big dog championships, right?
Just national world championships.
That's
whatever
right.
It may be.
What else is going on with you, man?
Pretty cool. Oh, well, I guess we can talk about, I rented a Tamron 150 to 600, the G2, to go on my Canon 6D. And, Northwest Pennsylvania, where you grew up, I think we get 10 days of sunlight every year. And at 600, I think it's 6.5 f-stop, somewhere around there. And, in the cloudy days, it's a little slow, but I've had sun the last couple of days, and I've got some killer shots on it. So it's pretty neat to reach out that far. I'm not used to tracking with a lens that far, but it's been pretty interesting. I like the lens.
Yeah, you've been pretty much focusing on birds in flight, correct?
Yeah, birds in flight. Hit some deer, a muskrat. I got a muskrat swimming around, and a few other ones. Got some nice turkey shots today, actually. Some gobblers chasing hens around, and I'm trying to think what else. Just some kid photos, stuff like that, them playing on a playground. But yeah, I mean, if it's light enough out, very nice, very nice. But I'm used to that 70 to 200, 2.8, and I'm kind of spoiled by that one, I guess.
Yeah, it makes a big difference for sure. I've got some photo news of my own to share. I had pre-ordered and received this week the new Sony A7 III. So I'm really excited to have that camera and put it through its paces, and did a lot of research and stuff on that camera when the specs were announced, and I just think it is the best bang for the buck on the quote-unquote entry-level full-frame line of cameras. And frankly, I think it offers a lot of features that are comparable with even the top line cameras with some of the other manufacturers. So I'm really excited to get some time on that, and excited to see what I'll be able to do with it, this fall when I get it out in the blind.
And what were you saying? How many focal points are on that thing?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's like, it's like 693 or something like that. It's 93% of the sensor surface is covered. So that is one of the biggest differences between a mirrorless and a DSLR camera. A DSLR camera's focus points will be more clustered towards the middle. I think I want to say your camera probably has like maybe 11 focus points.
Yeah, it's pretty minimal, and it shows.
Yeah. Well, and that's a little bit older camera. The Canon 60 Mark II, which they just came out with maybe 6 months ago now. I want to say that has in the range of 50 some. And there, so it's a little bit better, obviously, and by DSLR standards, that's actually pretty good. But it's still gonna be those situations where if you're trying to get things in focus that are on the edges of your frame, you might have to be doing some focus and recompose stuff, where that problem has gone away. Also, having focus points across the sensor like that will allow for much better autofocus tracking, which would be very handy for your bird in flight situation.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I'm trying not to talk about it too much because I just, I guess I don't want to spend the money on it. But I guess recently, because I was out checking on a few local ponds, a little, reverse migration going on. And every spring we get a lot of spoonbills, a lot of boot lips coming through the area. So I've been going out and hitting them up with this 150 to 600, and I was going down a dirt road, going through the management area that and just not kept up real well. And I heard I wouldn't say a pop, but definitely some commotion going on up in the front end, and got out on the highway a little bit and just could tell that there was something going on. So I get home, and the tire was still holding air, it wasn't bad. So I went to bed, woke up in the morning, and it was a little lower than when I got home. So put some air in it, took the kids to the babysitter, and about, 2 miles down the road, my tire pretty much, it didn't blow up, but it got flat real quick, and the whole inner bead just tore off the aluminum tire. So I went to get new tires, not knowing that my whole wheel was messed up. And they said, "Hey, you got an issue." So I found a used wheel, and I guess this coming week I'll get that and some new tires on the truck. So kind of excited about that. Not excited to pay for it, because that could have been going towards a new camera or equipment, but it is what it is. And
yeah, we've not had good luck with tires between the two of us. I blew one on my truck last summer, and then just this past fall, I blew another one. So I've had, I can relate to what you're going through, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not good, but
no. So that's what's been going on. It's That was a fun week. Fun week. Fun.
I tell you one thing that has been going on too. We've, as listeners of our show know, is we've opened up the podcast to, advertising opportunities and things. And we have had overwhelming support from a great list of companies that have come on board and are supporting what we're doing. So, as we go here and, a lot of our advertising schedule is sold out, which is great. What we had planned on for our first calendar year here. So we're super excited about that. And, again, we've talked about this a lot, but it's the listeners of this show that enable us to do the things that we're able to do. And now that we're being able to pull support from around the industry, it's going to further enhance those opportunities for us. And, all we can say is thank you to those companies and to those of you listening. If you hear us talk about a company on this show, you can rest assured two things. One, they're supporting what we do. And two, we support that company and what they're doing. We want everyone to know that when we're approaching companies about working with us, we're not just shooting it out to anyone and everyone that's willing to, open their pocketbook or whatever. We're approaching companies that we trust and that we believe in, as far as quality of product, customer service, things of those nature. So, rest assured that any company that you hear us talk about on this show is a company that both Dan and I stand behind and fully support. So we do encourage you guys to continue what you've already been doing and just, support the companies that support us and help to continue to build the HP community that we've been building, become bigger and better and, just stronger across the board. So thank you to everyone. And thank you to all of the companies that have already been, so kind and have been come on board and to work with us.
Yeah. I think when, we started sending emails out, and it's very humbling to, get the response that we did. And, I just second you by thanking them, and we really do appreciate it. And another thing that's really cool that we've been talking about in the listeners group is just how, down to earth the people behind the company name really are. Quack Rack 737, the Lifetime guys, like bringing them all on here. And, it's just, they're out there doing the same thing that we love. They love it. They're grinding, and most of them still have their day jobs. And this is, they just put a lot of time and effort and energy into what they do. And, like I said, it's just humbling. It's really, really nice to have the support, and, we'll be, bringing better content due to that. So it's good stuff, and really we're excited on this end, to keep going and growing. So good stuff.
Yep. And it's going to enable us to do some things this fall that we've not been able to do in the past. We've already got some things in motion to do that. So, we're excited, and we hope that, it creates better content for everybody and just a better product all around. So, let's talk a little bit about what we got going on this week. We floated out to our listeners group, and if you missed me mentioning it in the beginning of the show, if you're on Facebook, we encourage you to come over to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast listeners group. You can find it through the HP Outdoors Facebook page. We've got a link there, or if you just search for it directly, you can find it. Why that group is so important is because we run a lot of things through there that we're going to talk about on the show, and we ask for input in there. We do giveaways, all that kind of stuff we do in that group. And one of the things that we posed to the group a while back was for anyone to, that was wanted to share an experience they may have had with hunter harassment in the field. And we got quite a few stories. And I think hunter harassment is just one of those things where, unfortunately, as hunters, I don't want to say you become conditioned to it, but there's almost a level of expectation that you're going to deal with it a little bit, at least to some extent, when hunting. And that's really unfortunate because as hunters, we are legally protected in many, if not all states, with some level of hunter harassment laws that protect us from doing, what is a completely legal, act in hunting. So I know for me personally, I tend to be very what's the word? I tend to be very non-confrontational when I'm in the field with people, and I just like to not escalate things. And so I can't say that I've been in a situation where, some of the stories that were shared with us, I can't say that I've ever been in a situation that's been quite that bad. But I think we've all, if you probably think back to it, at least to some extent, have probably experienced hunter harassment in some form or fashion.
Yeah. And this, this idea, I was listening to Ranella on Meat Eater, and even though he's not a waterfowl podcast, he was talking about this couple guys that went down and hunted on the end of a dock, and this lady came out yelling at him and said that the cops were on the way, or the game warden. So she said that, you guys are hunting over bait, and they said, well, how do you know? And she said, well, I baited it, and that's that's how I know. So you guys are going to be in big trouble. Well, she was the one that got the ticket, and the guys were allowed to hunt the rest of their hunt, and then they had to stay out for the 10 days or whatever the state law was. But that gave me an idea, one, just because it was waterfowl, but I have a personal story, and I wanted to reach out and see what other guys did. And I did actually, one of the emails we got was one that we had already covered, but it was down in North Carolina. I don't know if you remembered this, but it was kind of when we were doing the news stories. The fella was, I think he's a guide, and he was out scouting, and another fella came up with his boat. They were out in boat scouting. Another guy came up in his boat, rammed him after a lot of racial slurs, rammed into his boat, climbed onto his boat, started punching him, tried to rip his motor off the boat, and finally the guy pulled a shotgun out to get him back into his boat. And the guy got arrested for, use of deadly force and attempted murder and whatnot. So that was pretty intense. I don't, we didn't get any stories that intense, but that was one that was emailed to us that we had already covered. So going from there.
Well, I think one thing's important to mention about this. Regardless of what the law protects us from and things of that nature, if you ever find yourself in a position where a situation is escalating because someone is, either harassing you or whatever the case might be, it's not worth escalating when people have firearms and things like that. Bad things can get out of hand quickly. So I would encourage everyone to try to de-escalate the situation you best you can. Just get out of there. Nothing, no hunting spot is worth, putting yourself or your family or your friends in danger. But do know that, there is recourse that you can take as a hunter, and it is your responsibility to know the law just as much as it is to know the game laws and things of that nature. It's your responsibility to know the trespass laws, property boundaries, property lines, and hunter harassment. And I tell you, Dan, one of the things that I didn't even think about this, because when I started looking into this topic, I Googled real quick what, the Virginia hunter harassment laws are for me here locally. And it basically says that anyone that is willing or knowingly, inhibiting your ability to hunt, and that's, the non-professional way to put it, basically anybody that's willingly or knowingly preventing you from doing that legal activity is guilty of hunter harassment. And in Virginia, it's a class 3 misdemeanor. And it does include specific verbiage in there about you or one of your agents, whatever, baiting a spot that hunters frequent, like the story that you just told about from Meat Eater. Mm-hmm. So that is specifically addressed in the Virginia law as well. So you are covered there, which is good. But, one of the things that I didn't really think about and consider that much is when you talk about hunter harassment, the people that are probably most guilty of that are other hunters. Yeah. I want to think that it's the PETAs of the world and the tree huggers or whatever, the anti-hunter community that are out there causing problems. But I think in reality, most of the people that are guilty of hunter harassment are other hunters themselves.
Yeah, and I'm looking through the stories that we have, and it's about 50-50, I think, here. You know,
Well,
someone taking your spot or...
Yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind. I mean, confrontation on public ground about, this is my spot or, this is, whatever. I think that probably tiptoes the line quite a bit. And, on public land, unless there is a law that says you have to be, certain yards apart or whatever, you have as much right to be there as the next guy. And as much as it stinks, if you get there at 2 a.m. and you're set up for 4 hours before daylight and another guy rolls through there right at shooting time, unfortunately, he's got as much right to be there as you do. So, a lot of guys get really irritated. You see it on public ground and you also see it with people hunting on property boundaries and things like that. Gets a little dicey.
Yeah, boundaries are a big deal, especially whitetail hunting. And we did have, a lot of whitetail stories come through, but we're trying to keep it to waterfowl. So, we did keep it to that. But I guess if you want to get started, I can.
Why don't you start with your story?
I can do that. Okay, so there is a pond that's not too far away from my house, and early season holds just a ton of birds, ton of geese, and you can go get there early, limit out, and be done, and get out of there before the rest of the flocks come. I mean, it's super quick. It's like the ace in the hole type spot, and it's by a road. And once we started shooting, this guy would come out and just bang the lid of his aluminum garbage can onto the garbage can and just smash it. And he'd just stand there. If birds were coming in, he would just smash it. So usually we got some shooting in before that. Early season, I think it's three birds a man. So usually we wouldn't limit out, but he would stand out there long enough to scare some birds away. And it happened, I think, 2 times. And, we just let it go. He would yell a little bit. And then it just got to the point where it was harassment. We didn't want to deal with it. So I think the third time, and we limited out every time, he would end up stopping and we'd keep shooting. And the last time, we decided, hey, we need to go talk to this guy and really see what the deal is, because where I live, as you know, is not developed area whatsoever. Pretty much everyone hunts. I don't think I know more than 3 anti-hunters. So, personally from this area, we're all getting in the woods and whatnot. So we go over. The guy claims that, one time he believed that we were shooting towards his house. And this would be over the road back behind where we always shoot. So there's no way that, unless it was someone else that was hunting this area, which no one else has permission, there's no way that we did that. So we kindly explained it to him. And for how aggressive he was screaming from across the road, he was very understanding, and we never had an issue with him again. He said, okay, thanks for taking the time to come over here. And, I swear that the one time you guys were shooting at my house, and we're like, the birds don't even come from that way. And the way we're pointing is not towards any houses, and, guaranteed him that it was not us, and we did not shoot that way. And that was it. So it was very easy to go over and talk to him. He, we weren't intimidating in any ways, and, it was pretty simple. So that's my story from just a local scene here.
Yeah. I'm trying to think back to, hunts where I've had something like that happen. And most of the time what we deal with here in the Northern Virginia area is, proximity to houses, right? And, people being unhappy with gunfire and things like that. And it's weird because we have places where we hunt where we're like right in the people's backyard, and they don't care at all. And I'm like, we're there Sunday mornings shooting at the crack of dawn, and they literally do not care. Then there's others where it doesn't matter what time of day it is that you shoot, and you're much further away, and they want to hoot and holler and cause problems. And, here locally for me on the Potomac River, the troubling part about that is, you've got people living there with some resources. I mean, those are not cheap houses, right? So they got enough resource to make it tough on you. And, they can get to the right people to kind of try to shut things down. Because, I mean, although you can legally hunt, and I'm not referring to the Potomac anymore here specifically, but, places can get together and try to enact these, like sound ordinance things and things of that nature. Similar to like how, I don't know how it is all over the place, but like here in my area, you can't really start construction and stuff much before like 7:30, maybe 8:00, depending on where you're at. And if you get out there and start running jackhammers and banging away and stuff like that early in the morning, you'll have problems because they have, some of these towns and jurisdictions have these noise ordinance where, you can't start before a certain time. They can do the same if they're having problems and a lot of people complaining about firearms and things like that. So they could say, yeah, you can hunt there, but you can't fire your guns till 8:00. That would be a bummer. So I think one of the things that's a good takeaway from your story is sometimes even if the people aren't happy with what you're doing, maybe there's a misunderstanding going on, or maybe it would do you some good just to talk to the people. And although you may never come to an agreement on, what you're doing, at least if you can come to an understanding that, hey, they recognize that what you're doing is not illegal and that you are trying to be safe and ethical and things like that, they still might love ducks and hate the fact that you're hunting them. But at minimum, maybe you can try to get a little, respect from them in the sense that, you're not doing anything illegal. So, they can call the police if they want to, but it's not going to do them any good.
Yeah, and going back to your hunting in backyards and whatnot, because you guys did have, did the police show up, or was it the game warden that said, you guys are totally legal to hunt here, but we don't recommend it?
Both. Yeah, we've had that one particular spot. We don't hunt there anymore. They basically, the property was split in half and was sold to a developer. So they built houses on one side of a 20-acre lake where we hunted. And I mean, we were just over the legal limit away from the back of these houses. And I mean, these are not cheap houses. We're talking $600,000-$700,000 houses here, right? But this spot is a hammer spot. I mean, it is hammer time. So the one time, they would call the cops every time we hunted practically, but the gates were locked. So the cops couldn't get back there. But one day we must have left the gate open or something, and the game commission came back down, and he came all the way in there and he checked us, and, we knew we were legal. He knew we were legal. But where we were is really difficult because on one side of the pond of the lake, there was a horse farm that had not been sold or anything. So there was horses there, and that guy always complained and thought we were shooting his horses. And then you had the neighborhood on the other side. So it was a delicate situation. And the game warden checked us out and he said, hey, you guys are, legal to hunt here. But he's like, come on. He's like, you can't find anywhere better. Like, and we're like, no, honestly, we can't. Like, and basically what his message was, he was like, you're legal to hunt here, and I'm not going to tell you that you can't. But he's like, don't screw up or we'll nail you. Basically like giving us the forewarning that because we're pushing we were legal 100%, but we were pushing the limits within distance of these homes and all these things. He's like, every time you guys hunt out here, they call me. So he's like, know that if you do something wrong, I'm going to nail you because I've warned you for it. So I think that's one of those situations where you just have to evaluate, is it worth it? Me personally, I don't hunt to have any stress in my life at all. So for me, that was enough to just say, okay, it's not worth my time anymore to do this, because the last thing I need to deal with is some sort of legal situation because you inadvertently make a mistake and, pepper a house accidentally or something like that, just something that happens out of the spur of the moment that you don't realize. And then it just repercussions. It's just not worth it for me. So yeah, that was, I guess, but they weren't really harassing us per se, but it was because of them not being happy with us there ultimately cost that, the spot for me.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, tip number one is take a rangefinder, because that's to know that you are in a legal spot. At least if you get warned or something like that, you're still legal and not going to get a ticket as far as that part goes. So, because that's that always happened around Conneaut Lake 2 North End. We had permission there, and those houses over there, we're legal, away from the road, away from the houses, and still got checked just about every time. But you're legal and keep hunting. I guess that we didn't get a stark warning like you did, but that's where we're at. So
another thing I like to do is not only bring a rangefinder, but I actually go on to OnX Maps or Google Earth or something like that, and I plot points around where I'm going to hunt, and I draw boundary lines around those areas. If there's houses, or in our case, like on the river, there's blind distances and things that you can't hunt within certain yards of or whatever. So I connect those points, and I make it like a boundary where I know if I'm inside the boundary, I'm safe. If I get outside of that, I'm either too close to another blind or too close to a house or something like that. So if you ever get stopped or whatever, you can use that as a proof source, being like, hey, this is where I was at, and take a picture of it on your phone when you're out there, so that when you come back in, if someone questions you, you can be like, well, this is a GPS, positioned thing. And I would also encourage you, if you have the flexibility, don't toe the line, right? Like if you can get 100 yards or 200 yards inside the safety buffer, that I'll call it, I mean, do it, right? I mean, unless there's a really compelling reason to be right on the line, I don't recommend it, because you're just asking for trouble, I feel like, if you do that.
Yeah. Just be smart about it. And even if you get told to leave or whatever, you're legal, and being told to leave is a lot better than going home with a ticket of any sort. So,
no doubt.
All right. Well,
let's. One other thing I just want to throw in about this too. Think about bird recovery. So, a lot of laws will protect you on recovering wounded game. Does not protect you, at least in the state of Virginia. I can't say it everywhere. Does not in Virginia, it does not protect you from trespassing onto someone else's property to recover wounded game. You still need to ask their permission. If they say no, you can't go. But think about those things, and is it going to put you in a situation where you might have to be confronted by a landowner that's not happy with you being there? And oh, by the way, now I've got a wounded goose flopping around up in your field, or
swimming in
limping
your
around, right? Limping around, whatever. That's not going to help your situation. That's for sure. So, think about that kind of stuff when you're picking your setups and, trying to figure out what you're going to do.
Oh my gosh. I couldn't imagine. Can I go finish off that goose bleeding in your pool right now? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure they're going to let you water swat a goose that's floating in their pool.
Anyway, all right, let's get into these. We're here 30 some minutes in already, so all right, I'll start out with the first one, and I did not put the names or I guess email addresses with these stories, so thank you again for sending them in. Although we're not putting your name out there, some people might appreciate that. All right, so first one. Last year in September, I didn't have much of a spot for early season teal or goose here in southwest Ohio, so I popped into a state WMA dove field just at noon. Had it all to myself. Action was slow with a ton of songbirds and the sunflowers. I was towards the end of the sunflowers and noticed towards the other end a lot of songbirds flushing down towards me in waves after an hour of sitting. Closer and closer, I start hearing a voice, thinking a couple hunters are making their way down the line to set up. I hear a boisterous laugh and more talking, and a couple of minutes later, after all the commotion, here pops out a lone hunter. He's just chuckling and talking to himself. Thinking to myself, do I wave and let him see me? Or is this guy a loon, and would I put myself at risk? So I wave, he waves, shakes his head, walks back up the line, mumbling to himself, chuckling again. He stops, I see a barrel point to the sky, and look that direction. There's nothing there. Boom, 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 all 3 rounds blasted into the empty sky, and songbirds feeding fly up everywhere. Boom, boom, boom. He empties his gun again and again, like this until what seemed to be an entire box of shells. it came to the point where I stood up and pretty much told him to knock it off. And I pack up after a couple minutes of quiet and make it back to the truck to see a trail of 12-gauge shells lining the way. I was hoping to stop this guy in the lot, maybe even get a plate number, and the guy was gone. So he had a lot to say to him, but the guy was already gone. Moral of the story, when you share public lands with everyone, you never know what or who you will run into. So it seemed like a half-decent encounter, really, besides the guy laughing to himself and talking to himself, but then he goes and ruins the rest of the day by emptying a box full of shells, pretty much.
Yeah, that's a weird one. It's, if that guy was a hunter, I don't know why he would do what he did to, just if he had any aspirations of harvesting birds that day, why he would just sit there and just shoot and go, whatever. So a little bit of a weird encounter there. It sounds like to me. I don't know. Maybe that guy, maybe hit the sauce a little early that day or something. I don't know.
Well, hit something. And that's another thing. Like, you go out and, especially around here, it seems like we have just a lot of drug activity, I guess, meth and whatnot. So I'm like you. I do not want to escalate anything. And it's kind of the same, stormy waters pretty much. If you don't, I want to make it home at the end of the day. I want to come home to my family. If it's storming bad, if it's dangerous, I'm not going to push it too much. And the same, if something's really out of the ordinary, like some guy talking to himself that's handling a gun, walking towards me, I'll be nice, not trying to escalate anything. In that case, if he starts shooting all shells off as he's walking away, I'd probably just let him walk away. If that's that, then let it be. Let it end there.
Yeah, that's. Frankly, if I'm in that situation and that guy's in the parking lot when I come out, I would not confront him personally. I would maybe if I can get his tag or something and report it in that form or fashion. But there's nothing good that's going to come out of confronting somebody like that in a situation. Who knows what actually ultimately happens? Probably nothing. But in the event, you don't know. That's another thing that just worries me about these situations. Everybody's dealing with something, right? I mean, you just never know what that guy's dealing with or what that guy's got going on. And, it's not worth finding out, in my opinion.
No, not at all.
Over a situation like that. So, judge it, handle every situation as you deem appropriate. But I am risk avoidance when it comes to this, because I'm just like you. At the end of the day, all I care about is getting home safe and getting back to my family. So,
yeah, the first thing I'm probably doing is texting you like, dude, you would not believe what just happened. And then just laugh about it, and that'll be it. So
yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. All right. I'm not going to read this word for word, so I'm going to kind of paraphrase kind of the deal with this next story. But basically, this group was hunting on a lake, and this story is very similar to the kind of the situation I talked about here locally, where you're hunting an area where there's a lot of wealth around the water that you're hunting. Those people don't really understand hunting and the regulations and don't care to understand. They just don't want you there. This particular situation, the group had to be 500 feet from any dwelling, so they made sure they had their rangefinder, and we're following all the rules as they should be. Get set up, and the first wave of birds come in, and they take a few, and of course, all of a sudden, you get the lady out there yelling, banging pots on the back dock. I think we can all probably envision something similar to this, and basically telling the guys that they're going to be dealing with the cops soon. Fortunately, the cops never showed up. Maybe this was something that this lady made a habit of doing or what have you. But, I think that this is one that we could all probably relate to at least to some extent and on some level. And unfortunately, it probably ruins the hunt for you. But the good news is you're not doing anything wrong. So, one thing that you could do is you could preemptively call the police or call the game warden, because in that situation, they're the one that's wrong, not you. Now, I guarantee if you call the cops on her, one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to be worse for you next time and you're going to have to call again and you're going to get arrested. She's going to get arrested, or maybe she'll stop and just kind of accept the fact that, hey, the law says that you can do that. And although she may not like it, there's nothing that she can do legally against it. So, common sense and maybe some patience and maybe just a conversation with her, like you talked about in your story. And, the worst case she could say is, no, I'm going to do this every single time you hunt, and then inform her, well, the law protects us. And the next time you do that, I will call the police and, have them come to your residence. And if she wants to go down that road, then that's her choice.
Yeah. And Lake Norman, that's Huntersville area. I think there's a lot of NASCAR drivers and whatnot on that lake. And Charlotte, I think you got, Panthers and whatever are they Pelicans? No, that's not. That's New Orleans or whatever
Charlotte
the basketball
Hornets,
team. Are
Bobcats?
they the Hornets?
The Bobcats? No, yeah. Bobcats. That's old school. The New Orleans Hornets now, right?
I have no idea. Someone's the Pelicans. But anyway.
I couldn't care less about the NBA, so. Sorry.
Yeah, my brother, no, me too. My brother-in-law lives down that area, and every time we drive over that lake, it's either, party boat season and, a lot of big yachts and whatnot out. I wouldn't say yachts, but a lot of very expensive boats. And I've always, every time you peek in those little back channels, you're like, oh, I bet that might hold some birds in hunting season. So, keep after it if you're hunting there, I guess. And like you said, just be careful of that area. So, I guess number 3 is, I'll move forward with this one. Opening pheasant hunting. So we go duck hunting to avoid pheasant opening day crowd at a pond surrounded by a huge acreage. Have 3 dozen decoys out, 2 spinners. Lands very flat so you can see the pond easily. 4 guys with orange hats come walking towards the pond. We call first, then stand up so they can see us. And even though we're trying to call in a group of redheads, they see us, and 3 of the guys politely avoid the pond, heading the long way around. And we keep calling. The 4th guy loudly says, "Screw it," and walks 20 feet around the opposite edge of the pond. When he gets about halfway, he stops to relieve himself. The redheads have flared and are going away. Did I mention I hunt alone with my dog a lot in all kinds of conditions, pretty comfortable on public land? I'm pretty sure this is a woman, because later on she's talking about her husband. I believe I accidentally cut this story off on my Word document, but this is where I could have made a better choice, and this is where I cut the story off. But she points her gun in a safe direction and fires it, and the guy ends up pretty much zip and run. So how do you feel about that one? Is that the approach you would have taken? She said she's not proud of the way she responded, and that was the end of the email.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate the story. I definitely can't encourage anyone to discharge their firearm, even in a safe direction. I don't think that's the way to go about it. And I think that the person who wrote this, I think probably, as they mentioned, regret doing it in that fashion. But, it's hard to say, I mean, the relieving themselves part,
after they said screw it and got right up in your hunting setup.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. That's weird to me.
And like you said, another hunter, and that they're not even hunting ducks, like they're pheasant hunting, and just go mess up your hunt. So
yeah, I don't get it. I mean, you read these stories all the time about people, hunting public ground and stuff where, let's use deer hunting for an example. They walk back and, you shine your headlight because you're in a climbing stand or whatever. And then they jack up a tree like 40 yards away from you. And I mean, I've just never been that type of guy. Like if I see a headlight, I'm going the other way a couple 100 yards for sure. In this situation, if I'm pheasant hunting and there's someone hunting down on the pond for ducks, I probably just kind of flank around it and go about my day. Don't think twice about it. Apparently that's, hard to do for some folks. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't understand a lot of mentalities, and especially that. And I can speak for you, I'm sure, that we do not condone discharging your firearms to scare people, even if they have ruined your hunt. Not so much the hunt, because I'm sure they left, but the decoying birds. So
yeah, I mean, the thing you run, the risk you run there is, even if your gun's pointed in a safe direction, when you discharge your firearm, you're putting yourself in a really, tough position, in the sense that the other people don't know maybe where you pointed your gun. They just heard it go off and they're pretty close, so they don't know if you're shooting at them or whatever. And that could just escalate the situation and go down a road that would be bad for everyone. So I don't think that discharging the firearm in any form or fashion should be an option you should consider ever. Unless you're in a situation where your life is in danger, that would be it. Other than that, I would say that there's probably better ways to go about it, to include just picking up your stuff and leaving. That's probably the best situation if it's really, got to that position or that point. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
Nope. Got it.
All right, let's see here. Let me scan this next story. This one also is kind of similar to what I was talking a little bit about with that pond and the property around it, because this particular story is it's a situation where a pond is connecting kind of four properties. The four properties connect in the middle, and this individual is hunting from a family member's property, and it does look like there was some houses kind of near where they would set up. Basically, there was like one house about 200 yards behind them from where they would set out, and then another one kind of out in front about 800 yards from where they would set up, and then no other houses were in line of sight. And basically, one morning after they start shooting, one of the landowner the person who owns the home behind their setup, so the one that's like 200 yards away, comes down and starts cussing at them and, telling them that they have no right to be there. And basically, they have a discussion about the fact that he's hunting a family member's property, and he assures him that he does have the right to be there. And, he tries to pull the move of, telling him that he's on his property, which this particular individual knew that he was not. But that's a common thing that people will say. So that's why it's important to know the property that you have permission to be on and where the boundaries are, because people will often say that. You're on my property or whatever. And if you don't know any better, it's difficult to counter argue that. But basically, he goes on to tell him that, he likes the ducks on the lake, on the pond, and no one had hunted it in the past, and all of these sort of things. So says he's going to call the game warden and have him write him a ticket. So basically, that ruined the day for them. But the guy the individual called his family member, confirmed that they were all good to go. And actually, his family member that owned the property was tight with the game warden in the area, so he actually contacted the warden to go and have a talk with the neighbor the next day. And ultimately, that neighbor got a warning, and they were confirmed that they were good to hunt that spot, and just stay off of his land, and you're good to go. And that, unfortunately, it would have been nice if the guy would have been a little more reasonable, where you didn't have to get a game warden involved to have that conversation. But that's where knowing the law comes in, and if need be, that can happen. But again, you're legal to hunt there, but also know that any action you take against that other landowner, up to including calling the game warden, is only going to make it more stressful when you hunt there. At least that's how I look at it. So I always try to take the easiest, most diffusing actions first, and then if you have to, escalate it. But yeah, it's still unfortunate, because although the law protects you, it still does impact your hunt a little bit in the future, because that guy's nearby, he's upset that you're there, and that any chance that he gets to try to get you in trouble for whatever reason, he's going to take it.
Yeah, and I think in the part of the story, they usually hunt with their uncle who owns the actual property, and maybe this landowner just didn't see the other landowner and came out and thought, there could have been trespassing or something like that. You really don't know, but it looks like the names that were called, the guy was really just upset, and they had hunted it many times before, But that was the first time without his uncle. So who knows what the situation was. But yeah, the guy got pretty aggressive, it looks like. And definitely, just know where you are and know you're right. So that's all we can say about that one. I'm going to move on here. All right, bear with me for a second. All right. All right, let's see here. We did our scouting as the sun set on Friday evening. Had a nice little secluded hole picked out to avoid competition. Whole area can maybe accommodate maybe 5 or 6 hunting groups. And with no one really competing against each other, we go into town, eat, and grab our hotel room, wake up around 2 a.m., and are pulling up at 2:30 a.m. to the spot. A couple trucks and a trailer are blocking the parking area. Not really an area so much, but the only parking available. Could have fit a few more vehicles there. I knock on a guy's window. He's sleeping, and I ask him if he can move so we could get off the road. Long story short, we parked on the road and started putting our kits on and grabbing bags. We had about a 30-40 minute walk with gear. The other party starts moving around, and a college-age kid comes up and asks me where we are going, so I show him on a map. He proceeds to tell me that that's too close to where they're hunting, and the place, they have 5 or 6 guys going, and it fills that place up. Told him where we were going is probably 400 yards from their spot, and plenty of area for everyone. He proceeds to tell me if he catches any steel shot that his 9mm hits a lot faster. I told him that it wasn't his land, it was all of ours. Sleeping in your truck does not constitute that you get that spot. And let's see here, keep going. Yeah, probably didn't have a carry license and technical training to shoot 3 armed people in the dark, but he didn't say that part. And then one of his buddies ended up running down the road later and caught up with him and said that, sorry, and that guy's a jerk. But just another thought, and this even... going back to the other story where the girl shot her gun to scare the guy, you don't know if they are game wardens that are just out with their friends hunting, or, police officers that have the day off and they're out hunting. Like, if you make a threat like that to a police officer, even if he's off duty, I'm sure that the consequences wouldn't be just a little slap on the wrist. I'm sure that they could pull something on you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. This particular story to me is the most egregious of them all. One, blocking the parking area. If it's public ground, it sounds like this is a public ground situation. Mm-hmm. He can't legally restrict anybody from getting in there. That right there, hunter harassment, right? If the state has the law to cover it, he's in violation of that law. 2. The second he refers to his 9mm or any of that crap that he did, I would be calling the cops so quick, because he's basically making a threat on somebody's life, is essentially what he's saying. So at this point, it's 2:30 in the morning. There's still plenty of time to salvage the day. I'd call it right then. I wouldn't have even hesitated to call it, because that's just like I'm saying. You don't know you don't know anything about these other people. You know nothing. Maybe they think you shot a duck that was working them or something like that. And the next thing you know, here he comes up in his boat, wants to start something. Now you're 40 minutes off the road walking, and a lot of things can happen. To me, I would not even play around with that. I don't care who he is. If he's a jerk, I don't care. I'd have called, no question.
And this is, they say that they had a hotel room. So, out of town, that's one thing, man. Going to different towns and traveling around, one thing that I always keep in the back of my mind, and I don't know if it's from going to college in Elkins, West Virginia or what, but do not mess with locals. And you don't know if that's a local and, that's been disputed for 20 years, that piece of property, and they're, blocking the parking for whatever reason. But it's just I don't know. Like you said, it would be tough to call if you went out of town and you scouted, and it'd be tough to find another spot. Like you said, 2:30 in the morning, you can still make adjustments, but that's just a situation. I don't mess with locals, because it's just I don't know. It's everyone's property. You're right, but also they're locals and they know everyone around there, and the police officers, the wardens, whatever, you don't know. So it's better to avoid that, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't take I don't take threats like that lightly. So, I mean, basically, yeah, I would leave it at that. I mean, if you threaten me at any kind of gun, whether he said it was his 9 or I'll bring a shotgun down there, whatever, it's over. I'm calling the cops immediately, and I'm having them come deal with that dude, because the bottom line is, if he's got the guts to say it to you, that means he's saying it to other people too.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is not isolated. You don't threaten to shoot somebody with a 9mm over because, you're hunting 400 yards apart. I mean, I would love to have someone set 400 yards away from me. It's like, you're lucky. You know what I mean? 400 yards is like a lifetime when you're in your public ground and stuff, this high pressure places. You'd be lucky to get 400 yards. It just seems a little irrational to me. Again, I don't know the situation. I don't know how many people are around or if anybody's been drinking or whatever, but that's all the more reason I don't play like that.
Nope. Again, not worth it. But anyway, I think that's the last of the stories that we picked out anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, there's more, there's many more out there that, that are more egregious. And, growing up in Pennsylvania, you read stories about people, you really see it with deer hunting. It seems like is even worse. And, I remember stories of people being killed over trespassing and things like that. It's crazy. And I still think that, one of the other aspects to hunter harassment too, that I forgot to mention earlier, is just the fact that, you are a hunter, right? And the stuff you deal with when that comes out in a public setting, depending on where you live, right? Okay. I live 30 miles outside Washington, D.C. Not a lot of hunters around here. When people find out that I hunt and kill birds and deer and things like that, not everybody loves that, right? And people make comments and things of that nature. And that's just part of it, part of the stuff you have to deal with. And I really try to take those opportunities to try to educate people and, talk about, putting food on the table and conservation management and things like that. Some people, will be open-minded, some won't. But, those aren't things that everybody else has to deal with, right? If I'm wearing a Delta waterfowl hat or, something like that, and people are anti-hunter, they're not quiet about letting you know that they don't appreciate you doing that, or whatever. How can you kill those innocent animals? What'd they ever do to you? Things like that. Meanwhile, they're sitting down to like a big fat hamburger or something. It's like, hypocrisy at its best, but you know how it goes.
Sweet leather shoes you got on there, bud.
Right. Exactly. I mean, so you know how it goes. We're going to deal with that kind of stuff throughout. And, when we talk about this topic, it doesn't mean that someone's got a gun in your face out in the field. It could be, everyday 10-minute conversations that, you're dealing with, but how you handle those ultimately, will serve you better to deconflict and try to come to as peaceful resolution as possible. And I think that's just the biggest takeaway of this episode, is that, be prepared for things like this to happen. Keep your head about you. Don't get worked up over something like this. It's not worth it. And if you're in the right, that doesn't mean that you still shouldn't back down and walk away, because ultimately being right is not as important as, being safe. And it's silly to have things escalate over something like this.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to that first story we talked about, the guy coming down, talking to himself, laughing and whatnot. I wonder what he would have done if the guy never waved to him, just watched. And that's the thing. Like, you read everything about all the drug overdoses and stuff, and I guess that's the part that like scares me the most, or in the back of my mind, to where, this person is probably not thinking right, especially if they come down talking to themselves and laughing. And if you actually laugh at yourself, like I laugh at my jokes sometimes, but they're like old dad jokes already. I think I'm already to that level. and they're really not that funny, but I chuckle. But if this guy's actually like belly laughing at himself, like he's probably on something. So avoiding, I don't know. I see it way too much around this area, and just the news every night, drug busts, and to put a weapon in that situation too, and you're the only person out there with that person in the woods. I don't know. And that goes back to, safety, letting people know where you're hunting and all that good stuff. Let them know where you've traveled to, when you expect to be back, and just a lot of things go through my head when that situation happens. But anyway,
well, that's why I always think about when I'm bow hunting, that's when you're. I think, in my opinion, that's one of the most vulnerable positions you can be in as a hunter, because like you talked about up in that area, meth labs and stuff, that people are out in the woods trying to cook that stuff up or whatever. You just never know what you're going to stumble on when you're out in the woods.
Right.
And particularly bow hunting, for example, I never, and I mean never, bow hunt without my pistol, concealed carry, because you could just be out there minding your business, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the proverbial hornet's nest of somebody doing something they shouldn't be. And all of a sudden, you're in a situation, and, whether you walk into someone's, marijuana fields or meth areas, or, somebody thinks you're trespassing and they come out with a gun and you're there with a bow. I mean, that's a losing proposition 100 out of 100 times. So, being aware of your situation and being careful is really important. But to that end, I'm not advocating at all, bringing it to that situation where you're drawing your pistol. I'm merely saying, just like every other day when you're walking down the road, if you're a concealed carry permit, carrier, your safety is paramount, and that's the last resort, but sometimes it's a necessary resort. So being able to manage that situation is pretty key. And, again, most of the times, I think back over the years, seeing guys, get in fights and stuff like that. And most of the time it's over the stupidest stuff, right? Just not worth fighting over, but cooler heads didn't prevail and it got out of hand. That is something that can easily happen in a hunter harassment situation, because those people are coming out to cause that reaction from you, to make you look like the bad guy. Even if you're being completely legal, all they're doing is trying to make you look like what they want you to look like. And don't give it to them. Don't feed into it. And, if they are violating the law, execute the measures at your disposal through the legal system to deal with that.
Yeah, man. I think you just talking about the bow hunting part brought up a point for Pennsylvania. Anyone hunting here or just carrying a pistol anyways, open carry is legal in Pennsylvania, but our governor just signed for the second time, put us into a state of emergency because of the opioid epidemic and all the drugs that are in the state. So now with that state of emergency, you are not allowed to open carry. Concealed carry, you're still allowed to, but as far as the open carry, you're not allowed during a state of emergency. So that's the second time. I'm not exactly sure how long the first one, maybe 6 months, but he just renewed that for anyone that does carry while they're bear hunting or anything of the sort. Just another tidbit if you're listening.
Yeah, open carry is a interesting topic to me, and this kind of deviates from what we're really talking about. But yeah, Virginia, we've got open carry, but again, if you're open carrying, it draws attention to it, and if you're hunting in a situation or with a bow, for example, and someone confronts you and they see you've got a gun on your hip, that's going to make the situation a little more challenging, I think. So, I prefer concealed carry anyway over open carry. I probably can't think of a situation when I would open carry, even though it's legal. In my everyday life, I never open carry. I always conceal carry, because if I'm a bad guy that's getting ready to do some stuff and I see an open carry, guess who I'm killing first? Yep. It's going to be that guy, because I've identified him as a threat. So, use your head. Not saying that I am against it. Of course I'm not. If you want to open carry, by all means, please do. But just know how people are going to react to that, and consider that.
Did I tell you that I went to the bank the other day and saw my first open carry? And I guess, I mean, it's totally legal. Well, I guess this was a few months ago, obviously before the state of emergency. But I walk in and the guy has a Kimber on his hip, and it seemed to be the one that I had just traded in for my Glock, just because I felt bad carrying it all the time because it was just too pretty. So I traded in for something I didn't mind banging around. And he puts an envelope right where I'm filling out a check. And he's like, "Hey, don't touch my envelope." And I was like, "Yeah, I see that Pro Carry 2 on your hip." And then immediately just starts talking to me. He's like, "Yeah, you like that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just traded one in." And but yeah, I mean, initially right off the bat, I saw it and I was like, "Oh boy, right here, right out in the bank." And that was, I don't know, it didn't take me back, but I thought it was cool to see. I wouldn't open carry for reasons like you mentioned, but you know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time that I shouldn't say that I see it a lot in Virginia, but I do see it. And I remember the first time that my son saw it and noticed it, which was interesting because he does not see me open conceal, and he, usually doesn't know when I have my gun with me. And he asked me why that guy had a gun on, had a gun in wherever we were at the time. And I just explained to him, he just, wants to make sure that we're all safe. And, in case anyone tries to do anything bad, he'll help protect us. And he's like, "Oh, okay." And like, that was it. He didn't care any less. But, there was some stories around where guys were like open carrying ARs and stuff into coffee shops and things like that.
Just to prove a point.
Yeah, right. I mean, proving a point. And again, I am as staunch Second Amendment supporter as there is, but just know that even though you're doing something legal, you are going to, that's going to, it's going to cause a reaction. And even though you're doing something legal, every action has consequences, good, bad, or indifferent. Everything we do has a consequence one way or the other. So just know what those consequences are when you make decisions. Make them for the right reasons, and just know what you're going to deal with based on those decisions. And that means that has to do with everything, not just gun carrying, but how you act in the field, how you deal with someone that's giving you a hard time about hunting, how you deal with a landowner that thinks you're on his property, all of that stuff. Just always remember, your actions have consequences, period.
Yes, sir. I think that, just trying to think of other hunter harassment ones. Besides the game warden coming in on opening day rifle, walking through the property, private property, and checking licenses, but that's not harassment. So,
no, warden's got legal right to do it.
Yep.
So,
it's all good, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered this topic enough. I think it was worthwhile to hear, and I think if nothing else, hopefully it gives you guys just a moment to pause to think about, situations that you've been in and maybe you could have handled better, or maybe you handled perfectly and it worked out great. And we'd love to hear both of those stories because we can learn from both situations.
Yeah.
Ones that you did right, what'd you do right, and why was it right? And, ones that didn't go so well, and what would you do differently next time, and things like that. So,
yeah. And if it's never happened to you, I hope that we hit some spots that you might think about, like, how would you react to that? Would you start screaming back at someone that was banging pots and pans, or would you go talk to them, or, it all depends.
Yep. So,
pretty good, man.
Yep. Share with us on social media or, at hpoutdoors.com. We'd love to hear your stories, and anything that we can pass along to the listeners, we will certainly do that. Dan, you got anything else you want to hit here before we wrap it up?
No, I just thank everyone for sending their stories in. Thank everyone for their hat purchases, and they're still going out. So, and I need to send you one of our new hats because I haven't even sent them to you yet. But
yeah.
But yeah, thanks.
And anyone that hasn't seen them, we've got the black mesh trucker hats available, and we've also got the new, is it brown like wax cotton hat?
Wax cotton.
Canvas, whatever.
Pretty nice. And
I wouldn't know, but yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So, thanks everyone for, just sharing our episodes and supporting us, whether it be the hats or, however you do it. Just the support really keeps us going. And again, thanks all the companies that have jumped on board and like what we're doing. It's, like I said before, it's humbling, and it has generated a lot of excitement on our end, and we're excited to keep it going. So that's where we're at. And we have a lot of good people lined up that'll be coming on here. And we're excited to bring that to you. And then I think I don't even know what today is, about tax day, right? So, a little over a month, and I'll be heading down to Southern Oak Kennels to pick up a puppy for my father-in-law. Be doing some episodes from down there, which is exciting. And I don't know how I'll handle that heat, because I know it's hot down there already, and we're still in the 50s here. So I'll be down there sweating, doing live videos and whatnot. But anyway, we got some exciting things coming on.
Yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and we'll go ahead and put a bow on it just like that. All right, that does it for episode 78. We appreciate the sponsors of this week's show: Lifetime Decoys, Gunner Kennels, Big Al Silhouette Decoys, and 737 Duck and Goose Calls. If you haven't caught up with all the episodes, check us out on iTunes. We'd appreciate a 5-star rating and review if you haven't done so already, to help more people just like you find our show. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the weekly episodes. We'll be back 1 week from today with another brand new episode. So for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.